Oh, this is how we're going to start it. We're going to start the podcast like this. We're talking high school graduations. This is the first edition of the Matthews Men Hill Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Justin. I'm hyped. I'm drinking coffee. Let's cut the music. Let's cut the music. Nah, that's not how we're going to do it. We're going to talk about high school graduations today. We're going to do it at a moderate level. We're going to talk about Butler. We're going to talk about Independence. We're going to talk about Providence, Rocky River. Each of these high schools has been involved in a little bit of the pomp and circumstance. And in my opinion, the class of 2021 has seemed much more positive than last year's crop of graduates. I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty last year about the pandemic, and students generally focused their speeches on how they were deprived of prom or traditional ceremonies. But the speeches this year focused on perseverance, they focused on overcoming obstacles. There were traditional ceremonies this year, unlike last year. Now there are some negative things about the ceremonies. CMS graduations, for the most part, are not very creative. Schools have to have cookie cutter ceremonies. One graduation speaker said he was only allowed 1 minute to speak, and another principal said that she was only allowed about 3 minutes to speak. While I appreciate the efficiency of hour-long graduation ceremonies, it would be much more meaningful if schools had a little bit more leash to plan their own ceremonies. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Let's get started with Butler High School. This was a very meaningful ceremony despite the constraints CMS puts on these ceremonies. But, they touched on a lot of things, and Butler held its graduation June 4th. One of the speakers I'd like to highlight is Amanda Wu. She was a salutatorian with a 4.62 GPA. She's going to attend Boston University to study anthropology. Let's hear what she has to say.
I'd like to take this opportunity and say how immensely proud I am to be able to stand in front of you all and see how far we've come and how much we've accomplished these past 2 years. Even if for some, this may have been one of the first times we've seen each other since March of 2020, we persevered through it all and made it to this Coliseum.
So I'm very glad Amanda mentioned that because the CMS school board voted in March to allow middle and high school students back in the classroom. There were some students learning remotely, but this was really, they had only been back for a few months. So Wu thanked the faculty and she thanked the staff for working through in-person, remote, and hybrid learning through the unprecedented times. She also talked about the importance of experiences in shaping who we are and how we use them to become who we are meant to be. And I want to play another clip from her speech.
We can use this pandemic as an excuse to why we can't move on in life, or we can use it as a motivator to find our purpose.
Again, another example of how the class of 2021 had more uplifting speeches than previous years, and they actually meant something. So, I next want to highlight senior class president Paige Summerhill. She reflected on some of the memories the class of 2021 shared. She mentioned pep rallies, she mentioned homecoming, she mentioned student-faculty basketball games, but she also brought up some very serious stuff.
These beautiful memories are also stained with the trials and tribulations that we have endured. Hurricanes, tornadoes, the tragedy that occurred on October 29th, 2018, and finally, a global pandemic. These obstacles have forced us to grow in all areas of our lives, and a lot of this growth is unfortunate and uncomfortable. The rites of passage which make high school, were stripped away, and we were left to watch our senior year through a computer screen. We've overcome and made it through.
Now, the tragedy that Paige alluded to from October 2018 was actually the school shooting that killed 16-year-old Bobby McKeithen. It's hard to imagine a school shooting being overshadowed by anything in these kids' lives, but a global pandemic would have to be the thing to do it. And I actually had a conversation a few weeks ago with somebody that attended Butler in the same in 2018, and how she was still shaken by the events of that day. The trauma still lives with some of these students, and we've got another year, another class that experienced it. I next want to call Lake Grupp. He was the valedictorian with a 4.66 GPA. He's going to major in civil engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. He reminded me of a classic Brady Bunch episode in which Jan Brady had to give this stressful speech, and her father was telling her to picture everyone in the audience in their underwear. And, Luke tried to follow that same philosophy, but he admitted he was a tad uncomfortable with the principle behind him. But he was able to encourage his classmates to not look at high school graduation as the peak of their lives, but more as a stopping point in which they could take a selfie on their way up higher on the mountain. So that was a pretty good thought on his behalf. And then finally, Principal Vincent Golden gave several examples of how the tassel is worth the hassle. That was a quote, including struggling with math problems before exams, having to finish homework when they really wanted to go hang out with friends. Golden told them that they are better, wiser, stronger, and more ready for that next step. And he outlined how life is a series of steps, but the key is to never give up in your climb up those steps. And he ended his speech with what he described as one of his favorite songs. He didn't say what it was. I had to Google it. It was If You Believe by Diana Ross, which was in the 1978 movie The Wiz. Let's hear a little bit of this thing. And no, he doesn't sing. No, he doesn't sing.
If you believe within your heart, you know that no one can change the path that you must go. Believe what you feel and know it's real, because the time will come around when you'll say it's yours.
We'll stop it right there. You can just watch Diana Ross singing on YouTube. But, Golden gave students fist bumps and forearm bumps before handing them their diplomas, which kind of kept the line moving. Other principals across the Charlotte region would shake a hand or would hug, depending on their comfort level. But that was kind of unique to see. Everybody got kind of a forearm bump or a fist bump. Moving on, I would like to hit Independence High School. They held their graduation on June 1st. Again, another efficient ceremony. The entire thing, including the reading of the names, was less than an hour. And the highlight of this ceremony was the speech given by Principal David LeGrand. This guy is one of the most thoughtful, gifted speakers in the school district when it comes to high school graduations. LeGrand doesn't give canned speeches. Let's hear him.
The word unprecedented has been overused during the last 18 months. And yet I find myself once again expressing what an unprecedented high school journey these young people have experienced.
And I'm going to paraphrase LeGrand a little bit. He noted how students learning online seemed impossible. Returning to class seemed impossible. Having events in sports arenas seemed impossible. He quoted Nelson Mandela, "It is always impossible until it's done." He even pointed out to the word impossible, saying that it can be separated into two words: I'm possible. Very inspiring speech. And to top it off, he even quoted Gandhi. He said, "Man often becomes who he believes himself to be." He read a list of things once thought impossible and then pointed them out to be possible. All right, the next graduation I want to focus on, Rocky River High School. They held their commencement June 5th. Some very good speeches in this class. Emily Mills, valedictorian, gave such an emotional speech in which she had to pause for several seconds to gain composure. I want to play a bit of her speech.
I am the embodiment of a dream of immigrant grandparents from Trinidad and Tobago and Costa Rica who have instilled the importance of education and hard work.
It's kind of some giggling, kind of some crying. She doesn't want to show that emotion, but such a great job, so inspirational. She went on to explain that she received entry into the 4-year Dowdy Scholars Program at North Carolina A&T, and she would like to become an OBGYN to deliver healthy babies and reduce racial disparities. This is a hot topic in the news as Congresswoman Alma Adams is fighting for that same issue of racial disparity when it comes to maternity. And Emily also thanked her mom and dad and encouraged classmates to follow their dreams and follow their hearts. I just thought this was one of the most appealing speeches in the Matthews Mint Hill Weekly coverage area. And we can't forget Principal Erica Turner, who comes from an athletics background. She gave a really good pep talk reflecting on how the class of 2021 endured through the high school experience, everything from losing a classmate their sophomore year to the junior year pandemic really coming into its own. So I want to play a little bit of audio from her speech.
And I know many of you would say that it ruined your senior year as well. But I want to encourage you today to look at the glass half full and rethink your blessings.
And I think Principal Turner hit it on the head there. That's why she's Regional Principal of the Year for the state of North Carolina. She always does a great job with the speeches. And finally, we're going to move on to Providence High School. Salutatorian Megan Wheeler came out the gate with the Mean Girls reference, in which she described how Katie imagined her classmates as a group of wild animals. But Wheeler, the way she looks at school is, she wants to be a pet vet. And she said the class of 2021 is more like the animals at the Humane Society of Charlotte. Let's hear her speech.
Just like high school, the Humane Society is a temporary stop on the path to a bright future. After animals come to the shelter, they are nurtured and taught the correct behaviors in order to find their forever home. While I enjoy helping out anywhere in the shelter, from playing with the cats in the community room, to organizing donations in the donation shed, to making enrichment treats for the puppies in Kennel 1, my favorite part has always been and will always be writing the names of the pets on the board as they've been adopted.
I just thought Megan gave the best student speech in the Matthews Mint Hill area because it was funny, it was thoughtful, and it allowed the audience to really connect with her. And she had only been at the school for 2 years, so she did a fantastic job with that speech. And we can't forget the principal, Tracy Harrell. She said it was nice to see the class of 2021's faces for a change, and she resisted the urge to hug the students. She encouraged them to do what makes them happy when it comes to their careers. And let's hear a little bit from her.
The isolation of COVID has taught each of us something valuable about resetting and restoring. Pay attention to those two words, resetting and restoring. It means that sometimes in your life, you will have to stop and try again. It means you will have to stop and look back at your life in order to grow and move forward.
Cool. I mean, that really applies to everybody, in my opinion. Harold went on to say that the class of 2021 will never be forgotten, not just because of the obstacles they encountered, but for the achievements they made in spite of the obstacles. And with that really concludes the graduation portion of our podcast. If you wanted to read more about these graduation ceremonies, you can check out what Carrie Simmons wrote on our website, thecharlotteweekly.com. She reported on Providence and Independence. I'm still putting the finishing touches on Butler and Rocky River. So those two will probably come out tomorrow on the website. But moving to the next topic, and we don't have much longer to go on this podcast, but I did want to talk about some of the things that the government bodies are doing in the Matthews Mint Hill Weekly area. So Monday, June 7th, we have a couple of boards that are meeting. The Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners was scheduled at 2:30 June 7th to have a joint meeting with the school district about its budget. As we reported, the county held $59 million of non-instructional funding in contingency until CMS provided them with a plan on how to improve student performance when it comes to Black students, Hispanic students, and a lot of other different subgroups. But the district has resisted, and they're probably going to go the mediation route to get that money. So this, stay tuned. It's probably a topic we're going to talk about in next week's podcast, and something we may be able to get in the paper this week if we have time. The next board is the Matthews Board of Commissioners. They were set to convene at 7 p.m. June 7th, a Monday. The board was going to continue its discussions of the annual budget. Town manager Hazen Blodgett has recommended a $26.4 million budget with a 1.5 cent property tax increase from 0.28 to 0.295. And the increase would pay for 7 new positions. We're talking police, fire, and public works. For several years, the town of Matthews has resisted the urge of raising taxes. And, Hazen has said in recent weeks it may be time to pay the piper. So stay tuned on that. Tuesday's a big meeting day. The Mecklenburg Board of Commissioners will discuss COVID-19 response. They're going to talk about the homeless people staying at hotels and the facility needs of the sheriff's office. And I looked at the meeting materials a little bit, and I noticed that as of June 4th, as many as 140 homeless people were staying in hotels. Just an amazing piece of outreach that gets overlooked on behalf of the Mecklenburg County leadership. And that's at 2:30 June 8th, Tuesday. Another meeting that same day, Tuesday, June 8th, Mecklenburg Board of Education, 6 p.m. The school board's going to hear reports from staff and approve a consent agenda that includes the installation and repair of mobile classrooms. I think it's 7 mobile classrooms and 1 mobile restroom at J.M. Robinson Middle School. That was the only thing I saw on the agenda affecting southern Mecklenburg. It was a pretty empty agenda. I suspect that whatever they talk about at the joint meeting with county commissioners is going to be the heart of that discussion on Tuesday. And then finally, the last board that meets this week is the Mint Hill Board of Commissioners. They meet Thursday, June 10th at 7 p.m. The board will have a handful of public hearings. The most interesting to me is, a Catholic church in Monroe wants to redevelop 2 residential properties on Willgrove Mint Hill Road for worship. And this is going to be a couple driveways past the park on Willgrove. And if you want the specific number, I think it's 5345, 5341. And so that's the one I'm kind of curious about. I want to know more about this church. Then there's a company called MHIP LLC. They want to reduce the conditions for a 90-acre industrial park at Domac Drive and Business Lane from 100-foot buffer to 50-foot buffer. And, with these sorts of things, it really comes down to, are there homes on the other side of that buffer? That's what it's going to come down to. The buffer is designed to limit noise. So if the board feels like there's enough buffer there that won't disturb the residential people, that will likely move through the board. The board's also going to decide on a request from Charlotte Water that would pave the way for a water tank at 12910 Palomino Drive. That's 12910 Palomino Drive. You know, I was listening in to the last meeting, and this topic was brought up, and Mint Hill commissioners were really wanting to put some branding on that water tank. You know, I don't think Charlotte Water gets into the habit of putting branding on water tanks, but I think they really want to get this passed. So they're probably going to let Mint Hill put whatever it wants to on that tank. We could also have a budget decision in Mint Hill. Brian Welch proposed a budget of nearly $23.7 for next year with no property tax increase. So nothing to worry about on the property tax front, Mint Hill residents. And that's pretty much the meetings for next week. It's going to be a busy slate post Memorial Day, but we're getting ready for it. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about before we close the podcast, thank you for listening, by the way. I want to touch on two big events happening this weekend. The entertainers will be featured in the Matthews Outdoor Concert Series. That's Friday, June 11th at Stumptown Park. Gates open at 5. Music begins at 6. The event lasts until 9. You will have the opportunity to eat out of a food truck. If you want more details, go to matthewsfun.com. And, you know, if you don't know, the Entertainers is more of a regional touring band that specializes in beach music, but they also play a lot of top 40, classic rock, country. They've got a pretty diverse catalog. And then in Mint Hill, we have Thirsty Horses headlining the next installment of Family Fun Nights. Thirsty Horses will perform Saturday, June 12th at Mint Hill Veterans Memorial Park. Family activities kick off at 6:30 p.m. with the band performing at 7 p.m. If you want more details on that, go to minthillevents.org. That's minthillevents.org. And Thirsty Horses can be seen performing across the Charlotte region. They specialize in rock, pop, and country. I think they perform a lot in the Lake Norman area. I think that may be where they're based. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, that's pretty much the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Check us out next week. We'll be a little bit more cleaner, a little bit more polished. May even have a theme song. Who knows? Anything can happen. But see you in the papers.